Hello! I think we're live. Hi everybody, welcome to our lovely conversation. My name is Aleena from the Fuse Create team. I'm the managing director. We are here in our beautiful office. And should I just keep going, Vanessa?
Yeah.
All right, great. And I'm here with Gavin. And Gavin and I are going to have a great chat today. Can you introduce yourself, Gavin?
Absolutely. Thanks, Aleena. Thanks for having me here in this amazing space. I'm Gavin Barrett. I am the co-founder of Barrett and Welsh, which is an agency that focuses on multicultural communications and inclusion through communications. And I'm also the co-founder of POCAM, People of Color in Advertising and Marketing, which is an organization that came to be. It was born in the early days of the pandemic in March 2020.
Lasted the test of time.
Yes, we met online non-stop for 2.5 years before we had our first real meeting a couple of months ago, I think. POCAM has done some really killer work in this space to advocate for diversity and inclusion.
And actually, Gavin is very humble. I'm a part of POCAM too. I'm on the steering committee with Gavin, but Gavin's very humble because Gavin's team does a lot of our creative alongside a lovely man. We have to give Eric a shout out.
Yes,
I think Eric does all of our creative now.
Yes.
But Gavin's team in the early days did a lot of our creative, one of which won a gold at the Marketing Awards
just the other day. Yes.
So
a very provocative ad. Thank you.
A very provocative ad that we can share with you later. It's amazing. Yeah. Well, we're here today to talk about inclusivity and authenticity in marketing as it relates to, first off, June is a big month in inclusivity. It is Pride Month. It is also Indigenous History Month, a very, very important month in Canada. And we thought this was a good time just to talk overall about inclusivity in marketing and, who's doing well, who's lots of people not doing well, so who's not doing well. But let's start broad about overall authenticity in marketing and how can brands represent inclusivity in a really authentic way.
Yeah.
I know you have lots of thoughts on that.
Too many to fit into half.
And also as a creative, this is a good dynamic because you represent the creatives.
That's true.
We've got lots of creatives, I'm sure, on the call. Would love to hear your thoughts. What does authenticity look like?
Yeah, it's a tough one. So let me start with it being National Indigenous History Month, and tomorrow's National Indigenous History Day. And one of the first things that I was having this conversation. One of the first things that we do in advertising and marketing is that we think about how we can sell things.
Yes.
In terms of engagement with reconciliation, that is completely the wrong approach, because if I was to put myself in an Indigenous person's shoes, and I'm not Indigenous, so I have to try to do that every time. I have to ask, what would I want somebody selling me anything? Wouldn't I want somebody saying, here's what I'm giving back that I took away? Mm-hmm. So why don't we start? So I think before we, when we talk about brand authenticity, and especially in regard to Indigenous relations, I think we have to figure out what brands, what corporations are doing, what work we're doing for reconciliation. All of us, us on the agency side, our clients on the corporate side, brands themselves. We can't begin engagement in a marketing sense. In fact, that's the last thing we should have in mind. The first thing we should have in mind is reconciliation.
Yes. I agree. You're right. We look at target demos and we sell them things or services,
Absolutely.
Right? Or experiences, whatever it is. I think looking at it from that, the Indigenous community as a target group is just completely wrong. And even how you tell Indigenous stories in a time where really we should be focused on reconciliation, and reconciliation is a story that you and I can't tell, as settlers in this country.
Absolutely.
We can't tell that story. It's a very limited number of people who can. And actually, if you take it to a brand perspective, an example that we've talked about before is Sephora, where I think there was a campaign that they launched late last year, which was heavily featuring the Indigenous community. But I don't know if you've noticed the pivot that they've taken, because this month they've launched a new campaign, but they've done that by amplifying an Indigenous brand called Cheekbone Beauty.
No, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, and so
Well, that's good because that's the
amazing.
brand I use as an example of getting it right.
That is a
Cheekbone
brand that
Beauty.
gets it right. I agree. And Cheekbone Beauty, what an amazing story, incredible Indigenous founder, really great product. But Sephora, instead of making it about maybe themselves a little bit, like the last campaign was, maybe slightly, has actually just given their brand a platform to Cheekbone Beauty to tell their story.
Vacate the stage, hand the mic over. These are acts of reconciliation. So
I agree. Now let's talk about the other side of the coin, which is, Pride. It's Pride Month.
Yes.
And we had a little conversation about this on Friday as I was scrolling through LinkedIn and I saw every rainbow logo everywhere. Have we taken it too far? Should we reel it back? What are your thoughts?
I'm sure you've done a lot of this thinking yourself as well, Aleena, because we have these intense conversations when we meet as a steering committee on POCAM, right? We're very, very lucky to have each other in that group where we can be so frank with each other and talk about sort of our collective pain, of experience on in terms of racism and that experience. But that there is a similar experience and an intersectional experience when it comes to the LGBTQ2S plus community, and I think the same fundamental rule applies as a test.
Yeah.
We need to ask: is this brand here just now, and then does it vanish? Does it just disappear? Mm-hmm. Or is it consistent? And I think that consistency is the test. If you're there for the community in multiple ways, not just there for the marketing of your logo in a key moment, where because that spells opportunism. It doesn't spell standing by a community that has been marginalized, victimized in so many ways over so many years.
And I think people have started to dig under the surface a little bit. If your logo is a rainbow right now, but you're also supporting anti-LGBT Q2S plus organizations or groups.
Yeah, politics.
Right. I mean, I think that has just become even more obvious, I would say, today, as people going back are looking for that authentic voice. I actually think I love Vivo's current campaign where when you see a rainbow, you scan it and they donate back to LGBT Q2S plus. That's amazing, right? That's an active, it's closes the loop, calls out rainbow washing, and says, actually, that's fine, they can rainbow wash, but we're going to give back, which I think is really great.
And that's that allows that. I'm sure that they're doing it specifically during Pride, but if something like that can then be extended through the rest of the year. Because the community doesn't stop being LGBTQ2S, after the month is done. It carries this is who we are, this is what we are, this is it's part of our being.
I mean, isn't that so true though? Like I would be curious to see what some of those organizations are doing in November.
Absolutely.
Are they still supporting the community? Are they actually showing up in authentic ways? Similarly to the Indigenous conversation of reconciliation, are they still taking steps to support the community outside these 4 weeks?
Or is it Orange Shirt Day and Indigenous History Month and then you're done? And the truth is, any of these communities, any marginalized community, any equity-seeking group, is an equity-seeking group because it has suffered inequity, and so working actively, consistently, committedly to reset that, and not to even out the stake, but to bump up those equity-seeking groups so that they have the boost that they need, that we need. Speaking as a member of equity-seeking groups. I think that is a test of a brand, and I think today's consumers are very sharp to that.
Yes.
They're not buying the BS.
No, not at all. Well, actually, that's a great segue to an audience question.
Okay.
Tokenism, our favorite topic. So how do we avoid tokenism in our efforts to improve diversity and representation? I mean, I think tokenism is so interesting, right? Because I know I've been in lots of conversations, and I'm sure you have, knowing what Barrett and Welsh does. You know, you're really in these conversations around ensuring that there is diversity in whatever advertising we're creating. But there is a fine line, isn't it, between diversity and taking it too far, and then tokenism being a component of that.
Yeah. You know, so at Barrett and Welsh we have these principles. Actually, the most common mistakes made in diversity inclusion marketing. And one of the first ones is insert visible minority. And we have an acronym, IVMH. Insert visible minority here advertising. Yeah, it's like, switch out white talent with black talent, switch out black talent with Chinese talent. And you can't get away with that. That first of all, our work needs to be diverse because our society is diverse. That we have to reflect the city around us accurately. So that's a basic, but that's not true inclusion. True inclusion is when we go deeper and we actually try to understand what makes somebody approach something culturally in a different way than I do. And I'll give you a perfect example. With mortgages and with debt. Asian communities are very debt averse. They have a deep cultural aversion, rejection of debt, the stigma around debt. So people don't like carrying mortgages. So a whole attitude towards, taking loans is to get rid of the loan.
Yes, pay it off as quickly as possible.
And that changes what you say.
It's an immigrant mindset,
yes,
right? You don't want to be the one.
Yeah, and that change in what you say, that knowledge forces, makes your marketing better.
Right.
Makes your advertising and communications better. You're actually now you're talking about including people by making your services the right services accessible to them, not the services you want to peddle.
100%. I mean, I think that's really interesting also when you think about, we always think about mass advertising as mass, right? But there's so many cultural nuances against the communities that we live in, and not even just that, like geographical nuances.
Oh, absolutely.
And if you're talking about, your example about mortgages is a great one. If you think about generational, there's generations in this country that don't feel like they're ever going to have a mortgage.
Yes,
right.
Especially now, right.
And then minorities believe that even further because of their financial, situations in our country. And so I think it's really interesting when we're talking about how we dive in to those cultural nuances, and it just coming to life in a way that is natural to people.
We've never see. This is the amazing thing. We in Canada until now, we've never questioned the fact that when we needed to talk to, say, snowbirds, we would nuance our communications to that audience.
Yes.
Suddenly now, when we have to nuance our communications to an immigrant, there are a lot of questions about why we need to do that. Well, we need to.
You need to.
We need to.
But you know what's interesting? I mean, I'm sure you find this. I find this oftentimes. We're talking about an audience, and I'm looking around the room, and nobody from that audience is represented.
Yeah.
I'm sure when people are talking about the Indigenous community, we have a huge lack of representation in our industry.
Yeah.
But even if you think about Black Canadians or people of color or immigrants, I remember I was sitting talking. I was a newcomer once. I was 17 when I came here. And we were talking about newcomer marketing, and I was the only newcomer in a room of 25. And I said, maybe you should, get a couple of newcomers. Like, I know you employ lots of them. Let's bring a couple newcomers into this conversation and talk about how they feel. So I feel like just even basic, as people from the agency side, it's incumbent on us to look at the group of people sitting in a room and say, are we representative of the people that we're actually trying to reach here?
Absolutely. And a newcomer, that's a particular group that people have not, understood how difficult that journey is. That those years are how dark that struggle can be.
Oh yeah.
And
emotional.
Tremendously emotional. I mean, it's a very exciting thing. To be a newcomer in Canada, to arrive here, I mean, I came here when I was 30. it is one of the most exciting things
and
you
when
can
you
do.
get the little flag pin, there's a lot of pride.
You've made it. You've switched continents. Homes. You left everything behind you.
Yeah.
And naturally, there's also nervousness with that. There's also anxiety. But then you get things like the way you speak is different.
Yeah.
Right? You might speak English fluently, but just in India, where I come from, there are, depending on which part of India you come from, there are completely different accents, and sometimes Indians have trouble understanding each other from different parts of the country because of the different accents.
Yeah.
And when we come here, we're equally ostracized because of our accents.
Definitely.
So suddenly there's this whole, you think you have an advantage because you went to school in English and all of that, but you don't. And there's hirers won't hire you. This brings me back to the seat at the table.
Yes.
I think, which is related to the question as well.
Yes.
Who's at the table? Who's shaping the work?
Yes.
Are we listening to those newcomer voices? Are we listening to those making room for accents, for example?
Yeah.
I think accent diversity
And
is one of those.
language.
Yeah.
Language.
Yeah.
I mean, we're doing a campaign for a very big sport that is globally, it's globally a global sport, and actually something like 49% of Canadians that watch that sport, they speak a language other than English.
Yeah.
That's a huge number.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of great campaigns, this one is directly for you
Okay.
from our lovely audience. Curious to what campaigns Gavin has worked on that he's most proud of as it relates to DEI.
That's
On the spot
tough.
question
So
here.
let me start with the one that just won a Golden Marketing Awards, which is for POCAM. So we did an ad for POCAM, and the ad was basically, the entire ad was white space, and it had a very small headline with an arrow above the headline and pointing to the white space above, which was most of the ad, and the headline just said, "The trouble with Canadian advertising," to make the point about how non-diverse, how snow white our industry is, and it is. I think the stats from 2019 or 2020 we were 72% white as an industry in Toronto, in a city that is 52% visible minority, which is a shame, And advertising hasn't changed yet, which is what the call for equity, POCAM's call for equity is all about.
Yes.
Which is celebrating its, second, third, 2022?
This is the third year.
2022.
Yeah.
No, it's
Well,
the second year.
We're going into
we're going into our third year.
Yeah. To shift to accountability.
Yeah.
I think that's the big shift, right? I mean, I think the call for equity is, to your point of white space, it is acknowledging the fact that there's a lot of white space in our industry for diversity, but I think now we've been talking about it a lot. And I know we have, I know as agencies we've been talking about it a lot, but now I think it's time to act, and it's action across the board. I mean, when you talk about immigrants, there's incredible, I mean, we hired 2 amazing people of color immigrants here in the last 6 months. I think immigrants is a huge form of talent, and on top of that, if we think about young talent, actually getting diverse young talent in the mix quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. The pipe. So a lot of students are coming to Canada as a pathway to immigration, and they're coming to colleges like Humber and Seneca, and Centennial, and their advertising programs, and we have the opportunity to hire into agencies directly out of these programs. But these kids are struggling. I can tell you that because I meet them all the time. They are struggling to break in because they don't sound Canadian, and that makes Canadian hirers uncomfortable. And
they don't have Canadian insight.
They don't have Canadian
even
insight.
Though
even though they've been trained here by Canadian
and
professors.
you think about how, I mean, we shouldn't just think about Canadian insight, right? Because we're talking to a global audience. 52%. Of our
this city,
is a global audience. So, and I think that actually takes.
And if you go to cities like Markham and Brampton, it's even more.
Oh my goodness.
68% in Brampton, 72% in Markham. And we need to think about how brands being more inclusive, how we as agencies being more inclusive to reach. If you're doing an ad campaign in a city like Toronto, and you're not spending, then now we can talk budgets,
Yeah.
because that's where the real...
That's where it comes from.
Yeah.
Comes in dollars and cents.
Yeah, and if the investment isn't in 50% of your audience in a city like Toronto, then you
and you know what's
what's
really interesting about that, and I'm sure you're having these conversations, we are all the time, when brands are consistently trying to find new audiences. That is the key area of growth, right? Is new audiences, and then you're completely ignoring 52%.
Absolutely.
Because you've got, advertising that doesn't actually resonate with them.
And all our replacement population in Canada
are immigrants.
Is immigrants and the immigrant birth rate.
Immigration and lots of refugees too.
And now the Indigenous community, because the birth rate in the Indigenous community is way, way above the Canadian average, and a little higher than the immigrant birth rate as well. So our replacement population, our growth population, in other words, if you're a brand and you're looking for where to grow, is only coming from these communities.
Yes.
So
time is now. Yeah. Which actually is a good segue to the next question. When it comes to diversity in ads, how do we, I feel like we're doing this a lot with POCAM and even in the work we do. Thoughts on mentorship versus sponsorship when it comes to diversity ads? I think as it relates to actually getting diversity, I kind of think it's a little bit of both. I think mentorship is really important because it's important to actually guide up a new generation of talent and actually share learnings. But then at the same time, as a brand, you have, that's, to me, sponsorship is where the money comes into play. Yeah. I think some of our as agencies, we rely on brand revenue and dollars to actually fund what we do, and fund creative, and fund sponsorship, and fund organizations. We support Down and Wenjack Foundation, is an amazing Indigenous organization. Yeah. Casey House, amazing LGBTQ. So I think we actually rely on those kind of commitments to help, and so do all these organizations, to help with reconciliation, to help with awareness and impact. What do you think?
The sponsorship end of things is the money end of things,
yes.
And it's the spear point, if you will. I think the sort of the soft area, but it's no less important, is mentorship, right? And mentorship is also we have to be cautious of. I'm probably liberal left as far as it goes, but we have to be cautious of this neoliberalism that says we are individually responsible and transfer responsibility to individuals. Individuals can do a lot, and we should do everything we can do, and that's where the role for mentorship comes in. But we have to, as individuals, I think the most powerful thing we can do is remind those with consolidated power and money to put their money where their mouth is. And your comment on, where brands are spending money and growth. Let's bring it back to ROI. Every single client, what's the ROI? What's in it for me? How do I grow my brand? Fastest growing population, where our growth is coming from as a community, it reflective of our society today. All of these are reasons why you put your money where your mouth is and sponsor and support organizations. Absolutely. And and I'll argue against myself because I'm a fool. The other side of it, though, and I think so. It's good business, and the business argument has been made. And my God, I've been evangelizing for that kind of investment for a long time. Yeah. And a lot of brands do get it. You get the big banks getting it. You get cars and retailers, CPG, and so they're getting it. They're getting the business case. But there's also another side to it, which is the investment in the community in a different way. So when George Floyd was murdered, a lot of big brands made very powerful statements and declared that they were going to be investing in anti-black racism work and in the black community. And to my shock, they didn't actually spend a cent communicating those initiatives to the community. Yeah. So no money was spent in black media. Yeah. No money was spent in black community organizations to reach, no grassroots work was done. It was all done through press conferences, which have their place.
Yeah.
But then when you examine how is this money actually,
Then
this
what?
investment flowing into the community, because that's the point of it, you realize the community is not being talked to. The flip side of that is that these organizations, and I'll just pick a couple of examples. There is BuyBlacks.com, which is an amazing news organization. Their website is excellent. Their content is superb, but if they don't get media dollars, they won't survive. And the same thing for organizations that focus on the immigrant community. I'm on the board for New Canadian Media, which is a journalism non-profit, and they're award-winning journalism non-profit. Again, it's a struggle for money. And when corporate Canada doesn't invest, these voices actually die out.
Disappear, yeah.
And that is a real tragedy for us.
Yeah, I mean, we're almost at time. We
No.
flew through 30 minutes. But final thoughts. I think for me, in final thoughts for anyone listening, and obviously we're going to put this on our Instagram and social channels after this. I think money. I go back to money. Put your money where your mouth is. If you're a brand and you're trying to think about what do I do with my budgets,
Absolutely.
support publications, organizations, creative agencies that are actually trying to make a difference. But then on a creative point of view, creative and inclusivity and building inclusive creative teams, any, final thoughts for those lovely creatives on the
So we're an unusual agency. Our creative team, I think we have one person. We have one person in our studio who's not a person of color, and one person in creative who's not a person of color.
I mean,
in the entire
you're one
team.
of probably a handful in our country.
We have the reverse going on.
Yeah.
My recommendation is make sure that balance happens, and make sure that it's not just that we're hiring kids out of the colleges, which we need to do because kids need those jobs, but also that we hire people in positions of power. Because you can't change things if you're the junior most voice in the room. You're terrified. Yes. I mean, if I think back to the start of my career, how much did I speak up in those days? So So we need to liberate our next generation, I think, by giving them examples and from before them, more senior people in
So
the
people look
boardroom.
up to.
Yeah.
People look up to. Well, I also think what's amazing now is that, I mean, you've been doing this for longer than me, but we weren't having any of these
really
conversations. He's not that old, but we weren't having any of these conversations until very recently.
Yeah.
So I think even the fact that we're having these kind of discussions and holding ourselves as well as our clients and the industry accountable, and accountability is the name of the game now. It's time.
Absolutely.
It's time to act.
Yeah, sign the call for equity if you haven't signed the call for equity, and report on your progress if you haven't reported your progress yet. And clients too.
Clients too.
I'm wagging my finger. They never wag your finger.
This is what happens when you put the two of us in front of a camera. We just keep talking. Any other questions? I'm looking at
That's it.
my boss over here. No? Okay, well, thank you everybody for joining in. Thank you
Aleena,
for making the trek to the West End
that was awesome.
for
I'm so
this.
happy
We
to
really
be here.
appreciate it. And if you have any questions, please reach out to our Instagram account, and lovely Vanessa and Zoe, who run our world, will let us know. Thank you,
Yes,
everybody.
thank you. Thank you, Vanessa and Zoe. Bye, everyone.